Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Branding Your Startup for Investment Opportunities. We're going to talk about how important this is and consistent across the highest performing campaigns. Very excited. It's a privilege to have MacEwen Patterson here with us today. MacEwen, can you go into your background a little bit? Tell the audience about your creative knowledge and how you apply it to campaigns?
Sure, man. Where do I start? I bounced around in college until I found one that would let me get a degree in outdoor education. I was really interested in self-directed education and ultimately veered into media, arts and entertainment, and writing. I actually technically got a degree in DJing, and that's a story for another day, but moving to Los Angeles, I was surrounded by creative people, pursued writing as much as I could, learned a ton in the music business about marketing. It's a very scrappy business. And I was on the underground electronic side before it had really popped. And so definitely scrappy. And then the internet was emerging, email was emerging, lists, newsletters, just marketing in general. I went from, coordinating street teams to coordinating digital teams, but still that same kind of guerrilla approach. And became a dad, learned a lot from that, had some life changes there, went into more broad business consulting, technology, staffing, operations, marketing, spent time in different service areas and different verticals at different, size organizations, Fortune 500. What's the other end of that? Fortune 1 million. I don't know what the other.
The big boys.
The big boys and the little boys, right? So plenty of time with startups. And over the years, I guess, one of my mottos is that marketing is operations, is marketing. Really everything inside and out of an organization is your brand, is what people experience, and their opinion is formed, based on that interaction, that relationship. And when I found DNA, and I guess not really found. I mean, we met years before you started this agency. We met at a gaming company. That's right. You were doing financial decks and I was doing storyline decks. That's right.
Social gaming.
That's right. Yeah. And so even there I was using, my love of storytelling to applying that to, social games. And where did you ask me my background? Right. So yeah, I love a good story. Obviously I can get lost in one sometimes. But given the opportunity to bring that background to DNA and to these investor acquisition campaigns that you guys have been running was interesting, and actually it's a challenge at first. I'm sure we'll get into this later, but the discovering that story brand model and applying that to the investor acquisition conversation was a game changer for me, for all of us. But it's something that I tried to wrap my head around for years, coming from a screenwriting background, trying to apply that hero's journey to the brand conversation. And I just kept putting the brand in the hero spot, and instead of the investor or the customer.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a breakthrough here. I think I'm doing our entire deck in my intro, aren't I? Yeah.
It's the hour-long bio that we're getting into.
There you go.
No, but it's perfect. And my overview of MacEwen would actually be more in-depth than that. I can tell you he's being modest about the success he had in the music industry, entertainment industry, writing across the board, early campaigns with DNA, and then now championing for clients on their campaigns as a campaign manager, digital strategist for some of the most successful equity crowdfunding campaigns live today. At DNA, we've of course run over 200, 9 figures of capital. That's where we're able to get these findings. And want to pull up this deck that we have created because it's a common question that we get asked of why do we need to talk about my logo, my color theme? Why do we have to do 20, 100 different images in my content library? Can't we just raise capital? Can't we just raise money with what we have? And we really want to position brands for success. We want to set them up for, give me a moment here. We want to set them up for the best conversion rate right out of the gate, where if we're introducing traffic, be it paid from advertising, organic from content marketing, and then finding out that, hey, the brand's not reflecting the valuation. The offering as a whole is not getting users excited. It's doing a disservice to the company as a whole. That is a problem. And that's something that we want to avoid. And MacEwen's been instrumental in these conversations. That's why we said, hey, creative branding, this is who we want on the discussion. So that's why we're hopping into this. Here are our headshots in case anyone wanted to use those, but wanted to hop into this. MacEwen, you want to add to that? Why do equity crowdfunding campaigns need to focus on this? Why do they need a strong brand?
It's honestly like any other marketing campaign. Oh, this is fun.
And
sorry, I live in a call center. No, it's really like any other campaign. So you're communicating, right? So yeah. Marketing is communication, branding is communication, but you can't be all things to all people. We've all, run into that phrase before and tried, maybe even tried to do that or be that. It doesn't work. So, what is brand? Unfortunately, brand is everything and it cannot be everything, right? So you really have to slice down what is your brand, what is the core values, what is it at its essence, and then measure everything up against that, right? And anything that isn't that, just set it aside. But the value of that is that you can communicate clearly with the people who are interested in what it is that you're offering. And anyone else who's not interested can carry on with their day, right? Yep. It's just about, identifying yourself so clearly that the people for whom you solve a problem or provide, value for their need can identify you immediately, get that taken care of, and improve their life and also carry on, right?
100%.
That's the only way that, you can be effective. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels and people don't understand who you are. And I think, on the screen here, we've got Apple as an example, and they're a great example, of effective branding.
When you're in an Apple store, when you're on their site, when you look at any of their assets, it feels like Apple.
Yeah, to be honest, I think that they've outbranded themselves in some spaces, right? So their hardware definitely lives up to their branding right now, and their software is trying to keep up, right? So their branding is outpacing some of their product. And sorry, I use all their stuff. Don't lock me out or
oh yeah,
don't hate me, Apple. But I do think that they're really trying hard to keep up on the software side with the effectiveness of their branding.
Absolutely. And they are looked at as the top brand in the world from many of the most authoritative publishers for a reason. They've had to strive to get there. There's films about arguments that have occurred to maintain that brand integrity. It would be high concept to assume every regulation crowdfunding campaign, every Reg CF could be at the same level, but that's what you want to be playing for. And if somebody's looking at your offering page on any equity crowdfunding portal, if they look at your website, if there are any other pitch materials, if they're on a webinar, if they receive any asset, it needs to look and feel the same. I made the analogy before about the valuation. We'll see groups with 40, 50, $200 million valuations. That offering page has to speak to a brand of that price point. So it is imperative that it's ready for the public, it's ready for a mass audience before you begin introducing traffic to it. And looking at this next page on further, why do equity crowdfunding campaigns need a strong brand? A well-defined brand allows you to tell your story, earn trust, and even get an investor excited about the opportunity that you are presenting. I wanted to read that in its entirety as it is a quote, but that's the importance to it. We'll often see a campaign that is not converting. On the flip side, do a focus group or have some type of discussions with our internal team or other third parties we work with and begin to understand there's a lot to misunderstand. There's a lack of clarity about the brand, about the offering. That's why this is such an important focus at the early stages and at any point that you want to improve performance.
Yeah, the other thing that you'll see too is, two startups in the same lane, like even the same idea, launching at the same time, and one campaign kills and the other dies, right? And if you look at them side by side, the campaign that's communicating the most clearly and also the most frequently is the one that's winning every single time. It's not even a question. It's every single time. So you want to be thinking about, and we're probably going to be getting into this a little bit later on too, but right. So trust, establishing trust doesn't happen immediately. It happens over time. It happens by answering a few questions, providing a certain set of data, and demonstrating that the team has a level of commitment that, is worth investing in. And most of those things aren't, like in the past, 90% of that was conveyed through body language and in-person communication. And, we're in a world now where that's just not the case anymore. Even, as the world opens back up, the amount of reach and connection that is available digitally around the globe, people have warmed up to it now, and it's even become, habit. So we're going to be seeing a lot more of these digital approaches of being applied to these types of campaigns in the future, regardless of, what societies, where you can be indoors or outdoors on any given day, right?
Yes. And as you're mentioning, digital adoption has increased. I think by last year, we were at the levels that were projected for 2025. And that means the bar, the level for design and for brand depth has gone up as well, too. And people don't believe what they see online. Establishing trust. I love how you emphasize that word. We even have this breakout here of brand equals trust equals loyal customers equals profitable business. A lot easier said than done, of course. But I want to use a statement I learned early on from a creative director, first agency I was at. People only notice bad design. Oftentimes the Apple design, going back to that example, is not spelled out by people walking into a retail store or looking at their site. They just know that it feels good. They like the way it makes them feel. On a psychological level, that's why we like things, because we like that type of chemical, that emotional response. On the other end of it, if something feels off, a font, a typography, including font size, spacing, images, you can have somebody's mom or dad who knows nothing of graphic design saying, this doesn't look professional. And that simply is not investable, if you will.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or even your voice, right? You can have, a sort of a traditional product that tries to get edgy with their voice, and it just misses, or it hits, like that juxtaposition will be, what people are looking for. So it isn't just what people can see. It's also, what they're reading, what they're hearing, what they're thinking, as they're interacting with your brand, which is much more than your logo.
Perfect timing for that page. Exactly. The actual voice and how you're defining it. If you're saying you're a trend-setting company that's disrupting, meanwhile your text feels like it was written by an outdated organization or a company from a different vertical, what have you, there's inconsistencies. And again, people feel those inconsistencies, even if it's on a subconscious level, I may add, but it definitely stands out. And as you're going through the process to invest, could be the determining factor of going with my gut. I just don't want to invest in this. I don't know why. Maybe it's that other brand. MacEwen was saying the side by side and how some companies make it and others don't. I like to use the example of Facebook and MySpace. When Facebook came out, I said, yeah, this is MySpace. I understand the college thing. Don't want to date myself, but I was in college, and no, you're missing it. It's the design. It's the cleanliness of it. It's the feel that you get. I hopped over to MySpace that same day. Some people miss these features, by the way, but there was animated backgrounds and music and all types of information that could even be deemed inappropriate for the internet about the profile and the questions. So Facebook, I think it was the Facebook at the time, won that race. But great that MacEwen brought it up. And I want to get into, some tactics here. So this page poses the question, if branding is more important than a logo, how do you create a brand that will attract investors to you? MacEwen, you want to give some thoughts, some ideas on that?
Yeah, sure. I really like this slide because it's so clean, and it really just conveys, the concept very well. But on the right, you'll see we've got this graphic showing, values, which is, what you're focusing on right now. Then your next ring is mission, also today, right? But this is sort of a larger context. Vision, so this is one day, this is where you'd like to take the company, and then purpose is, forever. And this is really, how can you communicate not just what inspired the company to begin, but what inspires you to continue on, and what is the world that you're creating that inspires you to continue forever? And how does that play out in internal conversations, in your sales efforts, marketing efforts, really everything. But
everything.
And when you're focusing on, investor acquisition, you want that everything to also be incorporated in that funnel, or that conversation, or that relationship that you're developing. So yeah, I think aligning and clarifying values is really where it starts, because that is going to show you, what you're capable of today and how you can achieve your vision. What are going to be the steps to get there, which is going to be your roadmap. And then, incorporating purpose is, who you want to be all the time, so that the world becomes this place that you've envisioned. And when you can share those succinctly with potential investors, they're going to see not only the return on their investment potential, but the culture and community that you're going to be cultivating as you build this organization and as you build the audience or the consumer base. And more often now, we're seeing investors aligning with organizations because the values that they stand on align.
Yes.
It's, I think, really interesting to see, and I'm not sure if we have this in our slides, but I'll just touch on this, that we've seen a lot of impact in our marketing when people get vulnerable, when companies put front and center, the reality of, who they are at their core, things they might not have shared, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And really, to be specific and concrete, we've seen success with founders saying, invest in a gay-owned company, right? We're living in a world now where people can be proud of who they are, connect with people on that level, and even support each other on that level at the, like investing in businesses. And not everything is identity driven, but things I think are authenticity and intimacy driven at a level that they never have been before, really, because the internet is democratized and digitized nearly every conversation.
And it's so complex today. And with, rising social issues, how does a brand respond to it? For equity crowdfunding, what I really want to make sure is clear is a brand needs to establish core values for effective branding. You see it at the core of this graph here. Everything's built upon that. And as MacEwen was saying, if the wording in an email or a statement made on Clubhouse or any type of messaging is inconsistent with those core values, it feels off. And as MacEwen's saying, investors resonate with it. We've polled different investors. We've also read testimonials on platforms that said they identified with the brand because of the core values. They invested because of the founder and what the founder stands for. It is very clear. We've had founders who pride themselves as female Black business owners. And that has been a core resonating factor of investors that drove them to the business model. They then found more, alliances with community, with different industries that they're servicing, with the product. But underneath all of that, with the projections, underneath all of that is the core values. MacEwen gave an example. There's many others that we can add there. We've worked with groups that promote conscious capitalism, ones that promote veganism or different types of healthier living as a whole. And that can be the difference from investing in your company as a founder or another issuer that's on the same portal. So you want to establish your investor persona to really understand all this. You want to really know who they are. I use the word persona because I like to get an idea, even put a fictional name. If I could tell what Sam does on the weekends, you could see this bulleted list. If Sam's 37 and works as a developer, and I've put income that reflects that, wants, needs as an individual, interests, behaviors, publications, and platforms. Very important. I mean, the publications and platforms, I want to know exactly where they go online so I could figure out how to reach Sam organically through content and advertising and direct outreach channels as well too. I want to be able to build the messaging for Sam and see, hey, would Sam actually respond to this, or is he going to think that's, a little over the top? That allows me to get a better understanding of who these individuals are, and could even be used to shape the brand as a whole. So being able to identify, prioritize changes, all very, very important. MacEwen, what comes to mind for you as you think of target audiences and how it pertains to a brand?
I remember when you had to just kind of make this stuff up, right? And now with the internet, you can actually, run some test campaigns and find out, who really does respond, and then build off of that. And there are some assumptions you can make going in, but then very often those will be, modified or even disproven. But it's such a dynamite time to be in marketing because the audience will tell you if you ask.
Yes.
And you can, from getting it right once, then you can get it right, 10,000 times, 100,000, and just keep going from there. But yeah, I just remember I'm thinking back on the days when we'd be like, I think this is my customer. I think this is my investor. And, go out and have 1,000 conversations to find out that, no, it's actually this other person.
Yep. Cast a wide enough net, A/B test, be able to have some analytics to compare. And like you said, hey, we thought it was going to be angel investors, but really it's our customers and retail investment interests from them. Let's change up the marketing over here. That's a regular conversation for us. So if you envision all of these audiences while you're building the brand, you're more likely to be setting it up for success here. And as MacEwen's saying, the data available today is unlike any point in history. We could see if Sam, as the example from the last page, or on this page, Jill Scott, is part of a LinkedIn group. And if she posts there as a professional, or where, she's a group member in Clubhouse, or any type of metrics on a broad audience sense. So here is a well-designed bio. You can see Jill's a regional director, travels 4 to 8 times each month for work. That tells us a lot about her just on its own, and sometimes that fact is overlooked when looking at job titles. She has a specific region in which she travels. She often visits the same cities and stays at the same hotel. She's frustrated that no matter who frequently she takes similar trips, she spends hours on her day booking travel. She expects her travel solutions to be as organized as she is. Travel products are likely going to resonate with her. There's a list of other ones that she interacts with in terms of businesses, so she would have some type of emotional connection to. Goals: to spend less booking her trips, to narrow down options quickly and effectively. Frustrations: too much time, too many websites, not terribly tech savvy. Her expertise, her focuses are in other places. We see some traits at the bottom, even a scale for personality, leaning more towards introvert, more creative versus analytical. The numbers, the actual feel, two different ends of the spectrum for her. Loyal, fickle, more of a loyal side. Preferred channels, motivations. You can see, if you're looking to create your brand, your offering page for Jill, you can put in different elements that are really, really going to inspire action. If you have multiple audiences, you're A/B testing them, that you're still building the offering page to represent your brand in that fashion, it is going to perform, at least as a rule of thumb, higher than if none of this was taken into account when filling out the forms on WeFunder or Start Engine or Title III Funds or any of these other platforms.
Yeah. I think the thing to keep in mind too, for people who aren't necessarily as numbers driven, is because I know that we're going over a lot of data and a lot of, and it starts to feel less human, is that at the heart of this is a love of people, right? So all businesses are essentially people. All good ideas that benefit people come through people. So if you can remember that, you're doing whatever it is that you're launching, whatever it is that you're raising capital for, it's to serve people. All of these numbers, all of this data, all of this, technology to connect people is to serve people. And really, ideally, what you're doing is pulling up enough of a story to show that your love of people can be communicated and distributed at a wide enough level that this idea gets funded and improves the world. Jason is a data junkie, loves the stuff, lives out of numbers. I start to get dizzy and I'm like, where's the storytelling? Where's the characters, right? So you really want the data to support the characters, and you don't want to lose any of the characters and the potential story without supporting it with data, because you're in an investor conversation. Those things are important. Hopefully that was a clear point and not just some flowery interlude.
We need more flowery interludes in life, but no, it's perfect because it is that balance: numbers, story, measuring, connecting, all are very important. And you're right, personalities of founders of teams will often point more one direction than the other. We'll get the inventor who wants to tell us about the product the entire time and is not speaking to the use of proceeds, is not speaking to the projections, is not speaking to industry comparables in a way that really sells the brand. On the other side, it's all the numbers, but there's no depth. It's just, hey, here are our numbers, here's a few images, invest in us. It's a blend of both. That we've looked at pages like that in the past week. I'm not making this up, but invest in us. It's really that blend of both. And MacEwen, I want to tee you up for this as we get into the story brand here. Can you talk about what we're looking at? Can you talk about what this means for an investor and empowering them versus selling shares?
Yeah, sure. So there's, for some background, there's this concept called the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell wrote about in a book of the same title, which talks about, in a saga, the hero has this sort of, path that they'll go down. And that we've got that outlined here. What Donald Miller did that was so brilliant and really honestly saved me hours and years of anguish, and is took that model and just applied it to marketing. I had been looking at brands as the hero of the story, and what he did, which is so clever and really works, is has the customer become the hero of the story. So in this graph here, you'll see it says a character, they have a problem, they meet a guide. So in this, the character is your customer or your investor, right? Their problem is they're looking for a way to improve the world. They're looking for some return. They're looking for something to be a part of that will make a difference in the world in one way or another, personally or beyond, right? So they meet a guide. That's you. That's the founder. That's the listing page. The guide gives them a plan, right? So right here it says, like, it's a plan. It's a whole page. It's a list, right? It's a whole discussion about how the world's going to be better, and it calls them to action, right? So it can't just be a list. It can't just be a recipe with ingredients. You have to have that picture of the juicy pie at the top, right? So they want to eat it. So they want to jump right in. And this model, applying this, is so much more engaging for people, because they can see how by making this investment and this company panning out, things going well, the world is improved in multiple ways, right? There's new jobs, there's new product or service in the world, there's some disruption, and things become more efficient, more effective, and ideally there's return in the investor's pocket. So all of that has to be clearly demonstrated. And think about it, when you read a good book or you go to a good movie, they show you the face of all the characters. Like, you spend time with those people, right? In a book, they describe everything. So you develop a relationship and a connection. Same thing here. It's relationship building. It's connecting. You're creating a story, and you really want each of your investors to feel like the main character in that story. That's what'll get them to buy in and stay till the end.
And if you're like me, the first time you've heard this, it's mind-blowing, in the sense of, you're trying to build stuff that resonates with the audience and get them to convert. But if you flip it all around and ask what's going to make them the hero, you could see a higher conversion rate across the board. And I said, empowering them versus selling shares. Yes, selling shares is part of it. It's empowering them to sell shares, but as a mid-funnel conversion. What you really want is that long-term relationship with them, not just a short stint, but hey, they've invested, maybe they invest a second time. Stats show 10 to 30% of investors, depending on the campaign you're looking at, invest a second time in that round on equity crowdfunding platforms. We're working with some groups on their fourth round of equity crowdfunding campaigns. You definitely want them along the ride for the next runs. Also, they can become your biggest ambassador. I've heard founders say, hey, that's fluff. I get that, but no, we're physically watching it with B2B companies, with B2C companies alike, where these individuals are making introductions, in some cases to media, and in other cases to additional investors, sources of capital, manufacturers. I've heard it all from people who've invested in a retail level and then brought different types of partnerships to that organization. And maybe it's that they're an active customer on top of that. Maybe you have a consumer-facing software, or it's a business in your vertical, an individual there that invests, and now they're benefiting from the growth of your organization by being just a super client, super customer. So look at it at the beginning of the relationship. Yes, the shares buy them in. Yes, that's certainly part of it and what we're all playing for, but there are bigger goals to be had thereafter.
Right. Yep.
Now, establishing your brand voice is difficult, to say the least. Having that consistency, doing it in a enrolling enough fashion. A brand voice helps readers and audience identify your brand no matter what, across all platforms. So we have this excellent chart here, which breaks down characteristics spanning from passionate, quirky, irreverent, authentic, description, comparisons for each of those characteristics, do's and don'ts for each of those two. MacEwen, whether it's going off the chart or just your own insights, how can someone look at this level of detail for the brand voice? And I know you've done multiple day, let alone multiple hour workshops for brands in establishing this.
Please.
So curious to hear your insights.
Sure. So, and in this specific arena, it's important to understand how investors have changed since 2016. With the Jobs Act, it went from nearly all investment activity in the world taking place, either on the stock market or privately, through institutional or accredited investors. And now with, these platforms available and, the whole range from institutional and accredited to retail, you see a much wider range of audience, people, from different backgrounds who will look at the same information and see it differently, right? So that's why the personas are so important to understand. You can even have a range of your voice so that if you've got institutional investors that are responding, you can be doing campaigns that are, more fintech, more of that financial, kind of a Wall Street Journal type of voice. Send that across to them. And then if you've got a bunch of folks who, all of their activity in the past is, as backers on like Indiegogo or Kickstarter, they might not even realize they're investing necessarily. They just know that they're backing something they like. You're going to want to have your language be as accessible as possible for somebody who doesn't have a big background in investing, right? And you want all of those things to sound like they come from the same place, right? Representing your values, presenting your mission. So it can get tricky, but you really, once you've got your persona and you think about them as the hero, what are they engaging with? What is it that is connecting with them? That will really help you sort out, okay, people like, it really helps to have concrete examples here, but let's say you're a technology company in the health space, and your persona is younger. It's 25 to 40. You can probably afford to have a somewhat cavalier tone and still really connect with people. Whereas if you're skewing older, you'd probably want to just keep it like, if you're in the health space, not a whole lot of like colloquialisms or short connector words or emojis. You just want to be clear, right? Because you're dealing with people's health. So tone is, and voice and all positioning is really, it shifts over time. You definitely want to be aware of where you are in the marketplace, and how you're occupying that space, and how it's resonating with your audience. And at a much larger level, there are firms that can come in and help large enterprises sort this stuff out. For an investor campaign, just understand that those personas will inform your voice, and you want to remain consistent. I'm so sorry.
And as you can see here, it's generally a blend of these, but the consistency is what is key. DNA is not raising capital, but we tend to live more in the passionate and authentic universe. Authentic being very important, as so many digital agencies get a bad reputation for not being. So the don'ts really, really resonate with us. And we want to make sure our passion and authenticity is showing up. That's how we've built our whole company, our product, let alone our brand.
And then also in this space specifically, you really want to be clear on the SEC guidelines about what you can say on and off of the platforms. And that's less about voice and just more about CYA. But Your voice will change if you don't CYA. I'll just tell you that.
And, want to give you some more ideas here about the voice, where it can live. We're going to get into some pages about third-party validation and putting all the
Before we do,
pieces.
I apologize. I also just really, your voice will evolve over time, right? So in your
Yeah.
first phase, your production value can be very low. You're still talking about your values. You're still talking about your mission, the team, the technology, whatever the commitment, right? And the inspiration. But you can do that for your seed round over Zoom. You can do that in, sort of a handwritten email. But you can be very low production value and still convert. By the time you get on to, your third or fourth round, your deck has to be sharp. Am I jumping ahead? Is this?
No.
Yeah,
No,
you
no,
want
this
to make
is
sure that
perfect. And particularly as it pertains to the brand voice,
yeah.
Evolution is the great, big picture, 10,000 foot view that you want to provide.
Right. And as you evolve, as your organization evolves, that needs to be reflected in the production value of the assets representing your vision. So,
and a lot of the times I'll hear a very surface type of narrative around the brand voice. But I want to know, how does it sound on Clubhouse? How does it look in Reddit? How does it look in Quora? How does it look in Medium? What about LinkedIn? How about LinkedIn Publishing or LinkedIn Live? What is the voice articulating there? Does it feel like all these other spots? Do you have physical, field type of activations? Are you doing any conferences? How about investor luncheons, different pitch events that you're participating in? Conferences are back open. What does the brand look like, sound like there? Is it going to feel different than on your equity crowdfunding page, than on Republic or Seed Invest or Micro Ventures or Net Capital? There has to be that consistency across the board, and that requires planning. That requires this type of work to say, hey, here's what it sounds like. I mentioned MacEwen doing exercises in the past. We've worked with branding agencies that'll talk about a brand's favorite color, its favorite car, what the brand does on the weekends, how a brand looks at social issues at that. Again, much stickier area. Don't want to dive too far into it, but it's important to know what those consistencies look like. And then the words that are used in the copy on any one of those channels are very easy to put together. They're more straightforward once you're understanding how the core values are presented in any of these forums.
Right.
So now we want to talk about third-party validation, social proof. I had mentioned before, I'll say it again, people don't believe what they see on the internet. The more logos you're able to share of partners, media publishers who've covered you, clients, lead investors, anything along those lines, naturally and on an internal level, people will just believe you more. They'll believe in the success metrics that you're projecting to a higher degree. The mere fact that you're going to adhere to your model and hit your growth metrics is more trustable. So look at different ways your brand can be associated with other brands to communicate, to convey social proof. If we tell you how great equity crowdfunding is, you could say, all right, well, you guys work in equity crowdfunding. If you hear advisors, if you hear media publishers saying equity crowdfunding has seen an explosive year of growth, it's the next big thing. All investment banks, all banks are all going to be putting their hand in the next 5 years. Wow. Suddenly as a founder, I feel more compelled. So look for these third-party validators to show increased levels of credibility to investors.
Yeah, I really can't say enough about this. I think it's because of how the brain works. If once something's established a certain level of credibility, once it's associated with something else, it just helps people add esteem, in their mind to what that thing is, and interest and curiosity in understanding it more. So this is a really key piece. I know we're kind of coming up on time. I think another key piece that we run into is preparing founders for what's really involved in an equity crowdfund campaign, just internally, right? So there's the whole external brand piece, and then there's internally in your mental state. Are you living your brand? Are you, and are you, do you, do you have the stamina to live that, 24/7 for the next 3 months to bring in that, 1, 5, 15, 20 million, whatever that is. Sorry, I know I'm jumping around a bit, but I think that is an important thing, that preparing your brand for a raise isn't just an external exercise.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important that it's built on those core values, that reflects the team. Part of the reason that investors are referencing the founder is if they feel they could understand, if they feel they know the founder and the way they think, the path forward is more predictable. The same is true with the brand. If it feels off, it feels inconsistent, and we're talking about third-party validation here, if the brand's saying they're one thing and Forbes is saying they're another, even though it's Forbes, it's like, okay, where is this off a little bit? Or a blogger or influencer, fill in the blanks. You can see in the graph here, there's speaking events, guest features, posts. Podcasts are becoming more popular for our founders to be featured on, PR groups and working with this. You want to make sure there's consistency across the board. I like to say you want the audience to be able to grasp what you're communicating in a fashion that's strong enough, not just for recollection, but for sharing. If they're able to tell their company, their friends, their family, whoever it may be, about what you're doing, this is where we see multiple investors come from one conversion, where an investor participates and gets a few other people in their city to invest in the same days to follow. This is where we'll see people who don't even invest make a recommendation that brings in another party or another group. And I want to bring this all together, put all the pieces of your brand in brand guidelines and wrap up everything that we're talking about here before moving on to closing statements. But put all the pieces together in a brand guideline, keep the elements of your brand in one location. With this in place, you can ensure all elements of your brand identity stay consistent, recognizable for investors. I want to add, this guideline's only as good as what you do with it. If it sits in a Dropbox folder for a year, it's not going to have the same impact as if it's referenced on a weekly meeting. I've seen groups start every meeting with the brand guidelines, brand mission, to see if they're staying consistent with it. I don't know if it has to be to that extreme for every group, but just as an example, people go to great lengths to make sure this is visible. And, we talked about the creative side, also the metric side. If I threw a CFO hat on, simply more investments raised when this is in place. So why not be playing for it from both sides of the company, both sides of the team? We got a checklist here with core values, investor persona, brand story, brand voice, third-party validators, aesthetic directions, style guidelines. How does all this live? Don't start introducing cold traffic to your funnel until, MacEwen and I used to say, until your brand is living its best life. Until you're giving it the respect, the clarity, the utility that it deserves, because that will be felt by prospective investors and will show up in your conversion rate.
Yeah, and ideally what you're creating here is a process that will support greater human connection. That's really what this serves. And so, try to keep that at the heart of, every step of the way. I think to just recap, because I like how this is all, put together. If it's your first raise, go easy on yourself, let yourself make a few mistakes. It's okay. Your investors will understand. And when you get to your second raise, you'll show improvement. But, make sure your deck is clear. Make sure you show up to the podcast that you get scheduled for. Like, be front and center, be willing to be vulnerable, be willing to be authentic. That will help people connect to your cause, more than anything else. And then as you go, try new production value pieces, try interactive decks, try, VR or AR investor meetings, try, especially depending on your space, right? And if you're in ag tech and the world's opening up, fly people out to the farm or something, but just do things that connect people to, what it is you're up to, and be willing to be vulnerable, be willing to stutter, be willing to say things incorrectly, be willing to look funny on camera. Because you know what? We all do that. Everybody is vulnerable at some point. None of us want to be. And the moment we are, the rest of us connect. So it's okay to, tell people the thing you're most afraid of. I promise you that's not the most, but that will get you some investments. Oh, do we have questions? Are we doing that Q&A thing?
Yes. I have something coming up here. Just want to wrap this with one last slide just to close everything out. And all of these play into the role, by the way, even third-party validation. I'll often talk about a brand based on who's talked about the brand. I'll say, hey, these guys were just featured by Trends, the Skim, whoever it was. This all feeds into it. The biggest thing, and I want to highlight what MacEwen said earlier, brands can evolve. They will evolve, whether it's intentional or not. But they can evolve in the direction that you want them to, in a direction, more importantly, that your audience wants it to, because remember, they're the hero. Use your audience to revisit and strategically up-level your brand over time. I have discussions with reward crowdfunding agencies, often getting involved earlier stage than equity, and they'll use focus groups to shape audience responses. And if something's not working, they're definitely polling to greater degrees. So look at it as a closed loop where your investors are giving you feedback, which is shaping the next iterations of how your company lives visually, auditorially, and on these offering pages.
Yep. Amen. Church.
Well said. So if you have any questions, feel free to add them here. Also, before we hop into questions, MacEwen, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, tap into your wisdom a bit further, what is your preferred method of communication?
Yeah, so if it's professional, it's M Patterson, MPATTERSON at Digital Niche Agency. If you would like to meet up for a cigar, I'm at stick.with.me.ig on Instagram, or even, I think it's the same, yes, stick.with.me.ig at gmail.com. You can also send cigars that I can review on YouTube, YouTube.com/MacEwen Patterson.
Very nice. And I would take them up on all of those invitations, by the way. MacEwen's actually a cigar influencer across multiple social platforms at this point. But I see one question here about timeline. So a founder's asking, hey, this sounds great, but how long is it going to take? What is a process or timeline that they could anticipate?
So and let's just take Reg CF, for example. What we prefer to do is, prior to launch, have a strategy session, and it's really a 1 month, I shouldn't call it a session, it's an engagement. 4 weeks, 8 sections, starting with industry research, competitor marketing audit, going into persona development, channel selection. We do a full content calendar, all the content for ads, so for paid, organic, and for strategic outreach on LinkedIn. Then we'll do budget projections and activation timelines. And then you've got 90 days typically for the campaign. And throughout that time, we've got kick off an onboarding and then weekly reporting and insight calls that we do with our clients to go through, you know, what can we optimize, what can we scale.
Okay. And I see one more here. Can you give examples of core values?
Sure. So I'll just give you ours, right? So our core values are be easy to work with, communicate early, and answer with algorithms. And we have found that those three things help us win and help our clients succeed. And they're really, those are based on, you know, that's how we've voiced those values, but they're based on success and affinity, right? Those are the things that we want to create. We want to create results and we want to enjoy the process. And the ways that we do that are, you know, communicating early, answering with algorithms, and being easy to work with. That helps us achieve those goals. So yeah, that's actually a great question. We could go back through that chart and just say, you know, based on our core values, you know, what are the things that we aim to achieve? That's, I guess, for a whole nother webinar, but
Core values webinar coming soon. The teaser.
Thank you for that.
Part 2. And also, James Toulin says, great presentation. What is the impact of iOS 14.5 update in terms of ad conversion? So to look at that in the branding light, we're actually, I mean, the impact right away is 4 to 30% of Facebook users are opting in to allow Facebook to track them. That's limiting. That means the amount of conversions that we see are not all encompassing. We're going after thinner data and attribution as a whole is harder. So when you look at metrics, they're not just for vanity, they're so we know what to optimize towards. Hey, this audience, this creative, this discussion around the brand is producing a higher level of response. Instead, there's smaller numbers there. And I see Jim adding here, 96% of people are opting out. So that's where that 4% came from. Same study. I've seen others as high as 30, but a lot of them are pointing towards lower ones. I think the opportunity, and to wrap up here for the branding conversation, and we're actually going to have future discussions, upcoming blogs, an article in Forbes, even a webinar talking about this a bit further because it's such a relevant shift to digital marketing, is longer funnels, deeper brand engagement. I try not to look at the downside as much as the opportunity. So the breakdown, we can't track as much from the pixel data. The opportunity, we could take audiences to a landing page, give them an asset, give them something of value, give them some type of connection to the brand that has them input their info. And then as we have their email address, as we're connected to them on different platforms, we can then match them pretty easily at the end of the day once they invest. I have their name, I have everything there. So it requires more steps, but allows for deeper brand connection. So we're trying to look at it in that light.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thanks everyone. We're wrapping up to exactly 60 minutes at the moment. As MacEwen had mentioned, M. Patterson at digitalnicheagency.com. Find him on any social platform. I'm there as well. It's been an honor to be able to speak with you today. We really value this time. And don't be bashful. You know, it's all about human-human connection, as MacEwen said, for brands. So reach out, send us your questions. We'll talk through it with you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. Take care.